I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House debates the human rights crisis faced by the people of Tibet.
On behalf of the IFP, I shall move at the next sitting of this House that this House debates the recognition of June 20th as the International Day in support of the people of Tibet, and that their struggle for freedom be respected henceforth in our Parliament as it will be in all other democratic parliaments of the world. Thank you.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that I will at the next sitting of the House, on behalf of COPE, move that the House debates the continued oppression of the Tibetan people by various economic and political means by China. The international community should prevent the deliberate policy of the Chinese government to colonize Tibet. I so move.
Speaker, on behalf of the IFP, I shall move at its next meeting the House debates the need of our government and its parliament to follow the example of the Canadian parliament and government and that of many other parliaments and governments which have awarded His Holiness the Dalai Lama honorary citizenship in recognition of what he represents for the righteous struggle for freedom and democracy of the people of Tibet, rather than continuing to follow the absurd policy of barring his entry in South Africa. I shall move accordingly.
Of the IFP, I shall move at the next sitting of this House that the House debates the complete lack of border control by our defense force, which has resulted in many instances of stolen vehicles and livestock crossing our borders into Mozambique. Thank you.
Speaker, I move without notice that the House notes that amidst the peaceful festival of Sagadawa, upon which Tibetan Buddhists observe the birth, enlightenment and passing of Buddha, the people of Tibet suffer at the hand of gross human rights violations. Further notes that in view of recent self-immolations, the International Network of Parliamentarians on Tibet calls on parliamentarians worldwide to observe a Parliamentary Solidarity Day for the people of Tibet on World Refugee Day, which is celebrated on the 20th of June 2012. Acknowledges the request by the International Network of Parliamentarians in Tibet to include the Tibetan plight in local World Refugee Day celebrations, and calls on governments and civil society to address the plight of not only the Tibetan people and other refugees worldwide, but to also include human rights protection as a key agenda item in all bilateral and multilateral discussions.
I move without notice that this House notes the Hanover Park learner Muhammad Rogers is one of 20 young people from around the world who has been chosen to carry the Olympic torch in a relay event in Nottingham, United Kingdom on 28 June 2012.
I was shocked and saddened to hear of the tragic and untimely death of former ANC Member of Parliament David Mdlali when I heard the news on Monday morning. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I would like to extend our sincere condolences to his family, the African National Congress, and to all who were close to him. Ambakakuhle umhlobo wam. May your soul rest in peace.
ID also calls upon the Minister to table in Parliament South Africa's Integrated Nuclear Infrastructure Review, which was completed as part of the International Atomic Energy Agency's requirement. The Deputy President assured me in this House last year that these decisions will not be taken in dark corners, but will be thoroughly debated by the public. So far, the ID has not seen any evidence that this commitment is being lived up to. I thank you.
Today is the first day of the International Parliamentary Action in support of Tibet, which will culminate on June 20 on the Tibet International Parliamentary Support Day. We are proud that this process begins here in Cape Town today. The Chinese government has all but declared war on the peace-loving monks of Tibet. Armed only with prayer beads and holy scriptures, these monks face off against the daily wrath of heavily armed Chinese security forces. Monks are often brutally beaten and regularly detained without cause by Chinese security forces. The human rights abuses perpetrated by China are on a scale so large that it should shock the very conscience of all mankind. The Inkatha Freedom Party, however, is not as weak and meek as this current government, and we say an emphatic no to human rights abuses in Chinese-occupied Tibet. We say to China, stop this horror story, reclaim your humanity, leave Tibet, and leave it now.
All political parties who are aligned to the principles of a people's democracy and fundamental human rights and freedoms should call on China to acknowledge and respect the cultural differences and freedom of opinion, assembly, and religion in Tibet and elsewhere in its territory. Like the people of South Africa, the Tibetan people have been fighting a decade-long struggle for freedom. However, the current wave of Chinese atrocities and human rights violations in Tibet, including arbitrary detentions and enforced disappearances, demand public pronouncements by all freedom-loving parties and parliamentarians. The deteriorating situation inside Tibet since the 2008 uprising has led to an alarming rate of self-immolations by 38 Tibetans since 31 May 2012. COPE is calling on our government to request the Chinese authorities to engage in good faith negotiations with the Central Tibetan Administration to provide Tibet with political, cultural and religious autonomy, to respond positively to the memorandum on genuine autonomy for the Tibetan people presented in 2008, and to reject threats of abrogation of the nominal minority status for Tibetans provided for in the Chinese constitution, thereby removing the basis for negotiations of real and substantive autonomy. We further call on the government to include human rights protection as an agenda item in all bilateral and multilateral discussions, venues or engagements with China, so as to hold China to the same standard of human rights protection as any other country without lowering the measure of human rights protection expected of China.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your time is up.
On account of its economic, financial and trade power. Thank you.
Speaker, the Department of Higher Education and Training has a crucial role to play in providing employable candidates for the job market. In this regard, the management and governance of higher education and training institutions are of utmost importance. The problems faced at a number of these institutions, such as CUT, VUT, TUT, Walter Sisulu University, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal, are an indication that higher education is not functioning at the level it should.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, let us appreciate the fact that members of the parties across the floor are speaking loudly about human rights, but decrying the fact that, by implication, the fact that the ANC continues to have good relations with the Republic, with the People's Republic of China. I just want to say, I want to remind the honourable members that it took the ANC 82 years of struggles against apartheid. And many people on the continent were blaming the ANC, saying that the ANC, why does it take you so long to change? Why don't you fight and just defeat these people? They are few in numbers. But the ANC, because of its inherent belief in human rights, it went on by discussion, negotiation, persuasion. That's the way the ANC will do things. Thank you.
We stand in solidarity with the people of Chinese-occupied Tibet. And Honourable Chairperson, at the outset, and as this is my maiden speech, let me convey my gratitude to the IFP under the visionary leadership of the great son of Africa, Prince Buthelezi, for granting me the opportunity to serve the people of South Africa as a member of this parliament.